right, we are going to learn about different 3D options within Illustrator, and some windows you need to get open at the start are your appearance window, you want your pathfinder, and definitely your symbols. And if you don't have your properties open, make sure your properties are open as well. So that's a good place to get started with the windows you need open. So we're going to start with making 3D text, and if you've done this in another class, it's always valuable to try it again. People do different things in different ways, and it's always a good idea to see it from a different perspective, and you might learn something new. So there's always value in going back to the basics. I always watch beginner tutorials because I always learn something new or how to do something faster. Everybody does stuff a little bit different. There's always multiple ways to do things within these programs. Okay, so I just wrote 3D with the text tool. I made the size bigger. I'm gonna change my font. Okay, so you just want a thick font. It doesn't totally matter, but if you have a super thin font, it's not gonna work that great. So we just come up to Effect, 3D, and we're gonna start with the Extrude and Bevel. So what you wanna do is make sure that Preview is checked so you can see what's going on. And since my text was black, it's really hard to tell what's happening here. You take this cube to adjust the angle of it, and you can see it turns into what's called the wireframe when we're moving it, because once I release the cube, I release my mouse, then Adobe is actually gonna draw that again. Okay, so what I want to do is come into more options, and I want to make the shading color a custom color since it's black. So you can really make it whatever you want. You can have your swatches and pick from there, which is why it's a good reason to have some swatches set up. So you can really do, that's the shading color here, you can do whatever you want. And remember, if you started with black as your text color, it will totally difficult to see. So what I could also have done is just change the actual color before I start. So now I can come back. Always press Preview, and you can see that. So this is a dynamic effect, and I'm going to press OK just to keep it as it is. And what that means is that, see how when I hover over the original flat non-3D text, the original flat text is here, and I can click on it and change the type. So that's what's a great thing about this dynamic effect, is that you can have more options within it. So if you want to get back into this, I've pressed OK, but maybe I still want to make some changes to the 3D. If you come up to Effect, 3D, Extrude, and Bevel, it's going to ask you if you want to apply a new effect, which you don't. You already have it on there. So what you have to do is you have to have it selected and come into the Appearance panel, and then click on the 3D Extrude and Bevel there. And then for some reason, it unchecks the preview. You just have to check it again. It's just one of those things. And you can make your adjustments here. So you can extrude it further. And of course, you don't want to do it too much because then it's really hard to read, but it depends on your object and what you're working with. You can also remove the cap, which for text isn't so great, but it could be cool for some stuff. So you can get some cool effects with that. And that's just this button here. And again, I'm just dragging this cube around, clicking and dragging to affect the shape of it. And you can either rotate by the corners, see how they turn green, and then I can rotate there, or you can click on one of the surface faces and rotate that way. So you have a lot of options within here. We're going to get more into the shading and this kind of stuff when we do different objects, but just play around with these and have fun with it. So you can also affect, if you're having trouble moving this around and you're not getting it the way you want, you can also type in values here. So I'm just going to type in 0 and get it more flat like that. And I pressed Enter, and so I got out of there. To get back in, I just need to click back in my appearance panel. And there's some issues that can happen. Let me zoom in and show you how to fix these issues. So see, when I zoom in, there's this, what's called this banding effect. And it's the steps of the blend that are created. You can see it in all the curves of the 3 and the D, and they're just like look like stripes. And that doesn't look so clean or great. So to do that, to get rid of that, we want to affect the blend steps here. So you can turn it all the way up to 256, which makes it really smooth. So make sure to remove that banding by changing your blend steps. There can also be what's called stitching errors, and let me get in here. And that usually happens with expanded objects. So it doesn't always show up with the text. So I'm going to expand this text and show you what that would look like. So let me get back. Okay, so I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go to Object, Expand, press OK. Now it's an object and not text, so I can't edit the text again. So I'm going to make it 3D, Extrude and Bevel. I'm going to increase my blend steps because you can see all that banding right here. That does not look great. And I might have to bring it all the way up for that to look right. And this might be something, this banding might be something we could fix with the shadows, and you do that by moving this light around. And see, that already looks better. So this is the lighting, and you can add more lights here, which we'll do later, but you can really adjust it a lot, and that's already looking a little better. So if you're rotating it around and you've typed some numbers in and you still can't get it back to the way you want, you can come down here to the position and go to off axis front. And that kind of gets it back to the starting point. So if you have some of these stitching errors in here, which are kind of like white speckly things that can drive some people crazy, and certainly if you're doing this for a client, you don't want them to exist. I don't know how much it's going to show up on the video, but there's like these little white spaces here. So there's some things you can do. One is you can just make a rectangle in black. So I can make a rectangle covering up that area, and you can make it black or the color of the lettering, and then I can go to my V selection tool, right click, arrange, send to back. And that kind of fills that up. If I turn the eye off and on, you can see it's filling up a little bit of those. Also, if you have a lot of that going on, and you'll know if you see it, if it looks super bad. Another way to do it is if you have a lot of curves and the edges have these white sort of spaces in between them, what you can do is you can copy, select it, select your object, Control C, Control F to paste in front, and then lock it, which is Control 2. All of those are up here. Paste in front, I copied, then I pasted in front, and then object, I locked it, which was Control 2. So now when I click on it, I'm just selected on the back layer. You can see here in my layers panel. Actually, I'm going to come in here and make this bigger, my panel options. Make this about. So you can see what I'm doing. So the top layer is locked. We're working on the one behind it. And then we can just fill that all in black. And then you can unlock this and you can group them. Right click and group. So that's a way, if you're having a bunch of stitching errors, if it's really not looking clean, that's a way to clean it up. Okay, so now we're going to add a shadow. So you want to use, if this was a logo or a flat image that you were doing, you want to go back to the flat image. For text, I can just type in 3D in the same font and size and line it up. Coming here into the size with my arrow tools. And then I'm going into my move tool and just getting it kind of set up. Make it even bigger. I'm just using my arrow tools. Okay, that looks about the same size. So you want to start with whatever your original image is. This is a good case to always make This would be a thing where if you're doing this for a logo, you might make a copy of your object and just have it sitting out in the edges so you can use it over and over again. Okay, so I'm clicked on this. I want to just like rotate it and squish it. So I can just rotate it like that. I'm gonna extend it out. I'm gonna go right click, arrange, send to back, and zoom out a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of get it looking the way I think a shadow would look. And you can spend time doing that. You can also right click, transform, and shear. And I'm gonna make the angle. Oh, of course I need to check the preview to see what it's gonna look like. So that's really starting to distort it. Let me get this angle, looks better this way, I think about 15 looks good here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And so you can adjust these. It really depends on your object. Press OK, and then I might move this back. Okay, so you can take a ton of time making this look great. If you have it showing below, it might look like it's floating. And if your object is complicated, you know, if it's text, you might expand it and adjust the anchor points and really spend some time there. So get it looking good and lined up. And then we're just going to make it kind of blurry. So all you do for that is come to Effects, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Of course, we want the preview on. And you can make it as blurry or as non-blurry as you want. And there's a shadow. And of course, I would spend some more time. I would probably expand this and make it not a type layer, and then I would drag this back to make it look like it's attached. But that looks pretty good for just a quick shadow. All right, so now we're going to do what's called 3D mapping, which is basically just placing an image or anything that you create in Illustrator on the 3D object. So first, the mapping can only happen with symbols. So you have to create a symbol first to map on to the 3D object. Anything can be a symbol. You can really make a symbol out of anything. So I'm just going to show you a quick way to make stripes, and then we'll map it onto a 3D object. So I'm just in the rectangle tool. I'm going to choose a color, and I'm going to draw the rectangle. And to make my life easier, I want my rectangle height to be 25 pixels because I'm going to make a solid stripe and then I'm going to make a transparent stripe, and together they're going to equal 50 pixels, and that's going to make it easier for us to repeat it. I think you'll see as we go along. But this is in inches up here, and that's not really helping me, so I want to change that to pixels. So I'm just going to File, Document Setup, and I'm just changing units here to pixels. And I'm going to make this 25. Press Return, Enter, and then I'm going to press V to get to my selection. Hold Alt and drag out another copy. And then on this copy, I'm just going to make no fill, no stroke. I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to actually make it longer. And then I'm going to go to Effect, Distort Transform, Transform. And this Transform Effect panel will come up. And right here, we want to make copies. Maybe make about 5 to 10. I'll make 10 just to be safe. And on the move is what we want to affect. So we want to affect the vertical move, and we want to move it. We want to move each copy 50 pixels, right? Because we have two 25 pixel widths here, and the vertical is going up and down. And we want to move it for 50 pixels, so the next copy will just start 50 pixels below it. You can check preview to see if it looks okay. That looks pretty good. I'm going to press OK. And then we have to come to Object. We need to expand Appearance. Then they're all selected automatically. And we need to ungroup it multiple times. I don't know, I think it's 2 or 3. Just ungroup it as many times until ungroup is no longer an option, and then group it. I know that's a little weird, but that's just how you make this work. So now we have, I'm going to zoom out, we have this stripy pattern, and you can just drag it into symbols, or you can come into the symbols panel and click this little paper, make a new symbol, and call it stripes. Make sure to name it, it's just easier, and you just wanted a graphic and a dynamic symbol, and press OK. So now that we have a symbol made, we can create the 3D shape. So what we're going to do is the Effect, 3D, and Revolve. And all that really does is revolve around any line or shape that you make. So I'm just in the pencil tool, and I'm just going to make a random line. I'm going to give it a stroke. So I'm pressing V and selecting it, increasing the stroke, and then I'm going to come to Effect, 3D, Revolve. You need to check the preview, and you can see we have this same cube that we can move around, and it's showing us the wireframe, and it's creating a 3D effect revolved around the axis of the shape. So you can see this straight line here. We can see the outline of the shape that still exists, and it's dynamic, so we can change it, and it's revolved around this axis here. We can also revolve it around the other edge. So see, from left edge, we can do from right edge, but that's going to look. So now that's revolving around the other side of the object. We can see there's some holes and stuff in it. It also doesn't have to revolve 360 degrees. You can try 90. See what that looks like. Just have to kind of click out of there. So now you can see, you can make all kinds of shapes. And you can see, because I had the stroke up a little bit higher, we can see the thickness of it. And this is where you want to start adding more lights. So here's our light source here, and you can see I'm moving it around. And then you just press this button to add a new light. And you can move that around as well. So for this one, you might want to highlight the inside of it, whatever this shape is. You can also use this button to move the light to the back. So when we turn it around, we can see light hitting the back, and that can create a lot of cool effects. You can add a bunch of lights. You can add as many as you want. I wouldn't add too many because it'll blow out the shape. And then if you went light crazy and you added too many lights, you can just click on it and press the little trash can, and it goes away. And if you want to bring this back to the front, you can just click on it, and you see it says move it back to front. So you really have a lot of options within this light. You can also affect the light intensity. You can lower it, make it softer. And then you can affect the ambient light, which is kind of like the light around it. Like if you think of the light in a room. So you have so much you can do here. You can affect the highlight intensity. You can really affect a lot. And again, remember the blend steps. If you start to see that banding, you want to increase those like stripy things. You want to increase the blend steps to smooth it around. So that's the basics of Revolve. And let me just show you a few things that might trip you up depending on what you're trying to do. I'm going to cancel. I'm going to delete this guy. So if you can revolve just around a straight line, right? And show you what that looks like. So I have a pretty thick straight line. Just come to Effect, 3D, Revolve. Let's preview it. And what that does is makes like a cone, but you can see the cone is hollow on the inside. So what we want to do is, what if you want to make a cone that's completely solid, right? So you might draw a triangle. So let me show you what happens with that. I'm going to delete. I'm going to come into my polygon tool, and I'm just going to click so I can pick the number of sides. I'm going to say 3 sides. Okay, so we have a triangle. I'm going to fill it because it's a shape, not just a line. And then let's try the revolve and see what happens. So that is not a cone. That is this funky shape. So what we needed to do, we need to remember when you're revolving stuff, because you might be doing all different kinds of shapes, that it's revolving around an axis, and it's this vertical axis here. So there has to be a straight up and down axis, unless you want a shape like this, which you can, of course, create. But I want it to be intentional, and I want you to get the effects that you want. So let me cancel out of here. What you can do is just cut this triangle in half to make that straight line. So I can come into my scissors tool, and I can just cut and make sure I'm lined up in the middle, cut, and then I can come back into V, my move tool, and we have these. And I can come into Effects, 3D, Revolve, and there we go. Now we have a solid cone. So just be thinking about the kind of shapes you're making and how they're revolving. You could also, of course, draw this with a pen tool. So I could just take the pen tool and I'll make a straight line. You know, you can hold Shift to keep the line straight and make a triangle that way. Let me finish it. And then I can select it, Effect, 3D, Revolve, and Preview. But you can see that doesn't look right either. And the reason is because we just need to change it. Instead of from the left edge, we want it from the right edge. And there we go. There's another way to make a cone shape. So just so you know, some of the things you might run into and get frustrated with, if you want the shape to be hollow, it can, but I want you to be able to make this stuff exactly how you want. Okay, so we're going to make a sphere, and we're going to map some of the stripes around it. So I'm just going to delete this stuff, and I'm going to come into my ellipse. I'm holding Shift and Alt, make a circle, and then I'm going, if you don't like the scissors tool, you can also do this. You can draw a rectangle, and it kind of snaps to these points. If yours isn't snapping, like it's kind of like a magnet attaching to these points, if yours isn't doing that, you can come into View, make sure Snap to Point is checked. That is a helpful tool. So then I can press V, I can select both, and I can just crop. So now we have a half circle, and I'm going to go to Effect, Revolve, Effect 3D Revolve, Preview, and I want to change edges there. And so now we have this lovely sphere. You can add more lights, you can change up the light intensity, do whatever you want to make yours look great. Remember, I mean, moving around the sphere doesn't really matter, right? Because it's a sphere. But you can do a lot with the lights. And of course, you can change your shading color to whatever you want. You can just click on this and pick a color. But I'm going to leave it black because I think that looks better for this. And then to get rid of that banding, we always want to increase those blend steps to smooth it out. Okay, and I actually don't like the way that highlight looks, so just for me, I'm going to take it down a little bit. Okay, so now we are going to add the art to it. So that's right here, and if you don't see the more options, you just have to, well, it shows up when you don't have more options checked. So you just click Map Art, and now see it's saying symbol on top. We have to have it, it will only allow us to map symbols. So that's why I set up the symbol first. So, but let's say you got the sphere and you're like, oh man, I forgot to make my symbol. That's fine. You can just make your symbol, and then if you want to, you can take your time, make your symbol, put it into your symbol panel, then you can click back on to your sphere, come into the appearance panel, and just click on 3D Revolve. You're going to have to check preview again. So it's never really lost. Just good to set yourself up. Okay, so we're coming into the symbol, and I'm picking the stripes. And now that doesn't look so great, so I want to scale to fit, and then I want to do invisible geometry, so the color of my sphere disappears. That's looking a little better. Now, when you can adjust this as much as you want, and the white part is the part where your object is. So you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can also rotate it, which is kind of cool. And you can really take time to adjust it and getting it looking the way you want. And you can go kind of crazy here. And so this is kind of a trial and error thing. If you have a really great math brain, you might be able to figure out making some shapes on a grid that look exactly how you want to. But if you don't, that's okay too. You can just spend some time moving this around, and then I would press OK, and then I come back and kind of move this all around and see what's happening, and you can see stuff gets kind of broken. So now I'm going to come back into the map art, and I'm just going to adjust, keep on adjusting till I get those lines the way they should be. And this is just one of those time-consuming things that you just kind of have to figure it out and spend your time. There, that's looking a little better. Spend your time getting it right. So obviously you can spend a lot more time on this than I'm going to spend for this tutorial, but I think you can start to get the idea. And you can really place anything on here. So I could pick, you know, this ribbon thing, and I can make it bigger, and you can move it around. So it's anywhere you want on your object, and you can see it warps around whatever shape your 3D shape is. So it's going to warp whatever the symbol is to fit onto that 3D shape. So you just want to take time to get whatever your symbol is looking good. And you can always scale to fit. I usually start with scale to fit and then I adjust. It really depends on your shape and your symbol though. And then, oh, what you do want to do, let me go back to the stripes. Let me get that in there. What you do want to do is shade the artwork, because that, when you click this button, shade artwork, it's going to apply the lights that you had in here. It's going to apply these lights onto whatever symbol you have. So you definitely want to check that, and then you can always come back in and adjust the lights even more. And this is where having the light on the back is going to start making a lot of sense. So really spend time making yours look awesome. All right, so now we're going to make a photo into the symbol so you can see how that works. So I'm just going to move this guy out of the way, and I move stuff into the gray when I'm not using it. So I'm going to place a photograph. So place, and I'm just going to take a photo and place it. One thing about this is that your symbol, it won't be able to make a symbol if it's a linked image. So what you want to do is, if you do place it, you can just drag it in, but if you do end up placing it, you want to go into your properties, which is just up in window properties, and you want to embed it. And when you embed it, it becomes a part of this document and it's not linked to the original photo. So this is embedding. It's also good if you're working on like a flash drive and you're working on the school computers and you don't want to have to find the image again every time. So Illustrator's not searching for that image in a folder on your desktop or something. And that's what embedding it does. So then we can just drag it in, name it. And you can obviously, and make it a graphic, dynamic symbol, okay, and then we can delete this. And you can obviously image trace this or do whatever you want to the photo. And now I'm going to make a more complex shape with the pen tool so we can see some of the other mapping options. So I want to draw a guideline basically. So I can put my rulers on. If I'm here in the properties window, I can just click on the rulers, or you can do view, rulers, and show. So when you have your rulers on, you can just click over here in the ruler and drag out a guide. It'll make this little blue line. And then I can come into the pen tool and I'm going to draw like a little vase type of thing or like a bottle. We'll see how it looks. You can obviously spend a lot more time making yours look awesome. And I'm going to give it a little foot. You don't have to do it all the way to the guide. I could have ended it here, but I feel like just for the sake of making it clean. Okay, then I'm going to press V and I'm going to fill it with a color. So it's just half of the bottle. So think about what shape you want to create and make half of it. You can even bring in an image of something and just trace half of it. That could totally work. So then I'm going to go to Effect, 3D Revolve, Preview, and see, it creates the 3D image. You can see on the bottom it looks kind of weird because of the way I drew that. So you can just adjust yours to make yours look great. You can try a different kind of shading. I think diffuse shading is more natural looking. You can see that you can obviously add more lights. You can affect the intensity of the light. With the diffuse shading, there's not as much options. But you can see it's a little more subtle, and I think that looks really good. And with the ambient light, just be careful because it might blow it out, and that takes away from a lot of the 3D effect if it's too high. So make sure you're giving yourself a lower ambient light so we can really see what's happening. You don't want it to be all one color. The shading is really what's helping it look 3D. Okay, of course you can change your shading color and all of that, and the angle. And then to map the art, we come back into map art, and now you can see there's multiple surfaces. So I'm going to click through these surfaces and they show up red. And sometimes some will be inside and sometimes some will be outside, and you don't really know until you map something to it. With this particular one, it's not hollow, so the inner ones aren't showing. But just for yours, if you have one that is hollow or like empty inside, you might map something and it doesn't show up. That just means you're on the wrong surface and you need to click to the next one. Okay, so I can take my little photo, I can bring it into the white part, and I can hold Shift. And so this could be like a label, really anything you want. And it's going to warp around the object in a 3D manner. And of course, you probably want to shade the artwork so it looks like it's part of the actual object. And you will spend a lot more time making yours look awesome. But that's the basics of it. You can just click on the guide and press delete to get rid of that when you don't need it anymore. And it's still a dynamic object, so we can make adjustments to it. And you can still click on this and change the color to whatever you want. You can put a gradient on it. You can get super fancy. You can also, I can come back in here in the appearance and go to the 3D Revolve. You can also apply different images to each surface. So I can come to the top here and maybe put the stripes on, scale to fit, and give it like a stripy top. And then I can go to the next one. Oh, I can go to the top here, get some stripes on there, scale to fit. And then you might just have to take some time to line those up, but that actually looks pretty okay. So you can really do a lot of detail work in here, and you can, for every surface, you can map a different image onto it, which is pretty cool, or a different symbol. Also, once you have your image, you can hold Alt near your selection tool and make as many copies of it as you want. And then you can also come in and affect that copy. So that's a great option. So I could do none here if I didn't want the stripes on this one. Where's that? And I could do none here if I wanted one without stripes. So you can make lots of options. You can always have one kind of saved one of your like base ones kind of saved out here, so you can really experiment with the ones you're working on and then always go back to the original. If you can also, you know, adjust this, make it bigger, change the shape. Just be careful because that's going to affect the mapping. Like you can see this gets broken here. So if you do really start, and look, those stripes are starting to look terrible. So if you do transform it a lot, you're going to have to come back in and fix that mapping.